now we are transitioning to yet another country, Bangladesh. So the last 3 years, our good friend Sharif Islam has come to Twin, and he kept saying, of course, as any good Bangladeshi would, when are you coming to Bangladesh? When are you coming to Bangladesh? So I went to Bangladesh early this year and found the country far more dynamic and interesting and exciting than I had expected, having visited in 2010, and it was facing a lot of headwinds and challenges. Certainly it still does, but the country has come very far in a relatively short period of time, and despite these challenges, perhaps energized by them, they've made an extraordinary amount of progress. So with this, I have the pleasure to introduce to you 3 leaders from business, government, and academia to share for a bit the story of Bangladesh. If I could welcome my fellow panelists to the stage.
Hi, Professor. How are you?
Hi, Professor. Very good to see you again. Munawar. So I will be there.
Yeah.
And then who is the first speaker on the dais?
Well,
this is your show.
We can sit here and talk. That's about all.
Oh, great. Great. So when I was in Bangladesh earlier this year, we talked about the plans that the country is coming together around for the future of the country, what the mission objectives focus us for the future. And I want to get to that. That's where we're going right after this. But quickly, I'd like each of you to share your role within the country, your perspective that you bring to the table about Bangladesh. So, Professor, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I guess we need to know the country in terms of what we are. And the question that I've been placing to all of us around is, consider the following scenario, that the entire world's population is placed in this beautiful country called the US. And the density that we'll have here will still be lower than that in Bangladesh. That is what Bangladesh is all about. And even then, with such a density, we are growing at 7+. So that is, well, that by itself is, I don't know how it happens, but it's happening. And this
well,
is exactly
I can explain to you how that happens,
Yeah.
but maybe not on stage.
Yeah. Well, exactly, of course. No, I'm not. In population, it's
Okay.
different, but
Okay.
we're talking about
All right.
economic
Yeah.
growth.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Sure.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm
Wherever
sure
my
you're
head is.
You're fixed
Yeah.
in one area.
Okay.
So this is exactly the thing that we haven't been able to sort of find out. What is it that we are doing which is really taking us forward? And I think the answer that I have is probably social innovation.
So we'll come back to this, Professor. I have to say, when we were together in Dhaka, probably a dozen people came up to you during the session and said, Professor, thank you so much. You've really inspired me, and I'm doing what I'm doing because of you, and you're a fixture in that country, and I admire that very much as a fellow educator. So, Anir, tell us a little bit about your role with the Prime Minister's office, with the government, and where you see, and we'll come back to this vision for Bangladesh in the future.
Sure. Thank you, Professor. About 10 years ago, there was a vision for the country that was set forward by our Prime Minister called the Digital Bangladesh. A vision for achieving a middle income status. We were, at that time, at 2008, still an LDC. We are just about to graduate from an LDC this year into middle income, into a developing country, and then a middle income country by 2021. So that was the vision set forward, probably for the first time in the country's history since 1971, when the country was liberated. So 2021 is the country's 50th anniversary, and that's the target that we have to become a robust middle income country. And my role within the government, from the Prime Minister's office, the Cabinet office, and the ICT divisions, the coalition of these 3 ministries, is to use technology for social development and social innovation. And we've done a number of initiatives across the country. One notable one is to set up about 5,000 what are called digital centers, which are very unique public-private partnerships where a small entrepreneur in a village is given a license to sell public services and private sector services. The hosting of this center is in a local government institution. So it's a government institution, but it's run by an entrepreneur. So it's a very unique public-private partnership where they sell these services from birth registration to passports to recently banking from the private sector to e-commerce. These centers are becoming e-commerce hubs for the entire country. So,
Anir, could you explain to everyone, that's very interesting, how does the equity, how does the benefit from performance work when it's this public-private entrepreneurial partnership?
So I'll give you one example. Let's take land records. Professor Ferhat Anwar already talked about if you put the entire world's population into the US, still won't match the density of Bangladesh. In that density, most people actually live in rural areas, but they have to come to the cities for services. So take the case of land record. Since we have very little land, so a land record, certified land record is a matter of life and death for most people. And to get to that certified land record, people will have to travel about 30 to 40 miles to a district town nearby to get that certified land record. There's a lot of corruption. Getting a land record takes months sometimes. So what we did is in these 5,000 locations, which are run by entrepreneurs, we gave a license to sell land records. So the application for that land record is made electronically from these centers. So they don't have to, it's typically within walking distance, maybe within 2 miles. So they would either trek over there or maybe take a local vehicle. And they would make an application there. They would get an SMS, they'd get a text message saying that this is when the application will be served. And the actual certified copy of land record would arrive by post, or they could go pick it up as well. So this is a combination of multiple ministries which have worked together to make land records available to the local residents of villages. And I'll give you just a couple of numbers. In the last 8 years since we started this process, we have been, these entrepreneurs, these about 10,000 entrepreneurs, 2 in each of these locations, have been selling services. And we've done a calculation last year of how much savings that we have actually been able to deliver to the citizens. And we have saved 1.2 billion person days, about 627 million visits have been eliminated, and about $4.7 billion have been saved by citizens because they don't have to make the trek to the district towns.
Wow, that's really something. But what, within the process, Anir, of making that happen, I mean, you make it sound simple. We hand out these licenses. They then sign up. They get an SMS. Done. Save money. I'm going to guess there were some political issues that were navigated to make that happen. What did you learn through that process of making that kind of really a dramatic change?
Well, the political process actually had to be used in our favor. And the combination of politics and the very deep-seated old-school bureaucracy, which was another barrier, we had to overcome both of those. As you would expect, these land records had a lot of rent-seeking associated with them. People would have to pay a lot of money, and there was a very strong vested interest group in the middle, intermediaries, who were making a lot of money because they would take these villagers for a ride, and they would actually delay the process and thereby make money. We had to convince local politicians. We also had to invest in a very interesting methodology called empathy training for the bureaucrats.
Empathy training for bureaucrats. Wow. Can we talk more about that later?
Sure.
So how did they take to this? When they got the brochure that said empathy training, are they, hey, I'm in? I mean, how did that go?
No, what we started with the senior bureaucrats, permanent secretaries, and we failed because they just would not take the risk. Empathy requires taking risks. So what we found out in our exploration is that the mid-level officials in the districts and the sub-districts, they are the most open to accepting new technologies and new methods for making change because they know the system, but they're not afraid to actually do an experiment. Our cabinet secretary, who's the head of civil service, and our prime minister have introduced this mantra, which we call failure is okay. So it's okay to fail. We also introduced this thing called the innovation fund. It's an innovation fund targeted to the civil servants, and also to anybody outside the civil service who want to make a social change, who want to actually make a change to improve public service delivery. And in the last 5 years, since our finance minister launched it, we have received about 4,000 applications, funded about 200 of these projects that range from local ambulance, which is very low cost, baby incubator, digital systems for land records, the ones that I talk about, birth registration, so on and so forth. So a lot of these projects have become, they're owned by civil service because they've actually proposed that. So when we give them a small amount of seed money, and associated with that seed money is the license to fail. That is a very powerful combination. And that's how we've won over many of the civil servants, the bureaucrats. The politicians have come in and they think that this is a way to actually gain favor from the Prime Minister because she's leading this whole entire effort. So the political will of creating a middle income country using digitization, using technology is a very compelling thing for the politicians as well because the Prime Minister has said that this is what has to be done.
And then there's something tangible that they can talk about.
There's something tangible, this savings that we talk about. This is very tangible. It's unambiguous.
So Munawar, we'll go to you in a second as an entrepreneur, but why do you think, and Professor, if you have a thought about this, why do you think that mid-level has been, certainly see why they would be capable of trying experiments, but why do you think they've been more excited and open to trying new things? Why is that?
Two reasons. One is that the authority they have to make change. They realize that. To the empathy training, they're actually given that realization. So the empathy training is a 5-day immersion course where they actually reflect, they go into what is called mystery shopping, they actually visit each other's offices and find out what's wrong with the colleague's office. So a doctor would be sent to a school, a teacher would be sent to a land office, a land officer would be sent to a hospital. So you mix them up.
It's a small country. There is an element of competition within that particular area.
Talk about that, an element of competition. What do you mean, Professor?
Well, you see, what is happening is the way it has been designed, they are actually looking at each other as well. It's open. So they know exactly what the other guy is doing. And while they do that, they also are aware of the fact that if they really want to move up the ladder, they really need to perform. And that performance is actually pushing them to perform.
So they have something to prove and somewhere they want to go.
Yes. And on top of that, what is even happening is, which is very interesting, that we are also, for example, even at our institute, we are offering them skill sets training particularly for the next generation, keeping the industry sort of for in mind. And they're coming up and they're spending their own money to improve their sales skill sets. So that is the amount of effort they're putting in, this mid-level bureaucrats, even the private sector, but most of the mid-level bureaucrats.
And is this university government engagement formal? It's a formal engagement.
Very formal engagement.
Great. So let's come back to the social innovation question and start it with Munawar, who is an entrepreneur, investor in a number of spaces, and you have a few very exciting businesses that you're scaling across the country and eventually the whole region. Munawar, tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
Thanks, Rob. I think I'll follow up on what Anir said, is that this whole digital ecosystem that has been driven across the country, basically what companies like us are doing today is sort of creating deliverable demand in unserved markets. When we say that 70% of the population lives in rural Bangladesh, that means a lot of the things that they need, actually standard companies don't end up doing that because it's such a difficult job to go about doing it. So what we started was basically with energy, delivering energy at the last mile. If you look at the globe, there is almost 1 billion population which remains unelectrified. Almost 1 billion population. In Bangladesh, what we have done over the last, I think, 10 or odd years, we have taken at least 25, 30 million of those people and sort of lighted them.
You know, I want to point something out here, Munawar, for a second. It's easy to gloss over statistics, but in the last couple of decades, when we hear these numbers of hundreds of millions of people worldwide that have been brought out of abject poverty, imagine being in abject poverty and seeing that transition and feeling that transition with your children, that they might actually have a better future. That's tangible. And when you're in
Absolutely.
Bangladesh and other places, you see this transition happening in the streets.
Absolutely.
And we don't see it that much here, and where we do, we gloss over it. So your energy business, which is very exciting and scaling rapidly in Bangladesh.
And the whole issue is that when people in the city, we always think in kilowatts, right? But how watt peaks can actually make such a significant impact at a village home level, you know?
Yeah.
The LED lights, the development in solar panels, energy efficient appliances, how all that is changing the way you can actually deliver. So what we did was, the initial scale up was through a government program, almost 10 years back. But today what we did, we used the power of the smartphone and entrepreneurship. We sort of brought them together, similar to the concept that the government wants to do in the public service. What we did was, we took the energy delivery to the last mile by creating on village entrepreneurs, connected them on an app in a smartphone, which has financial, working capital management, product information, training, everything. So there are right now 600 entrepreneurs on 3,000 villages in the phase 1, delivering. And the whole goal is, from 2019, scale it up to the rest 75,000 villages. Because the reality of life is that grid can never reach the last mile.
Yeah.
So you always will have interrupted, inefficient, low voltage electricity at the last mile. And we believe that these are the last mile entrepreneurs. If they are empowered, they can actually understand the real customer's ecosystem, because we have an algorithm, even in terms of projecting what is the energy demand. So every day, these entrepreneurs are doing surveys, which are getting fed into our main servers, and they are helping them to project what could be the demand in the next 3 years, or 3 months, 6 months.
So they are the distributed nodes near the point of demand, and you're providing the platform that coordinates and optimizes
And connects
the
them
system.
in the ecosystem using a smartphone. And we believe that, you know, technology with the human aspect, and to us the human aspect is the entrepreneurship. And they both must connect.
Where do these 600 people, the 600 entrepreneurs, where have they come from? How did you connect with them? What do they have to bring to the table?
Okay, so out of the 600, 200 were actually our existing people who had job with us. So they were given a choice, either continue with a job or become an entrepreneur. The rest 400, we actually went out there and hired them. Right now, we don't have an online system to get them on board, but by January, we hope to have an online system where you can like download in the Android app, and you will be answering like around 15 to 20 questions on entrepreneurship, aptitude, on financial creditworthiness, and so that will help us to enlist them in a mass scale. But right now, we are physically going to centers like the district or sub-district level and hiring them at the phase 1. But phase 2 is in January when we do it online through an algorithm in the app.
So forgive me if I missed this. These are solar installations?
Yeah,
or?
so these will be all solar-powered clean tech products, starting from as little as lighting system to TVs, fans, to household drinking water pumps, to electric vehicle fast charging. That's another information. Talk about Tesla trying to sell vehicles. We got 1.5 million electric vehicles transporting millions of people every day in Bangladesh, you know? And what as a company we are trying to do is, those are traditional electric vehicles using traditional batteries. And in the next 6 months, we hope to pilot fast charging using supercapacitors so that those vehicles can be charged in a matter of 5 to 10 minutes. So each fast charging station will be entrepreneur owned. So they will be taking, just like a gas station, you know, they'll be selling the energy to recharge.
So the platform enables energy and development in the communities where they live.
Exactly.
It's exciting. So let's go back to Professor about social innovation. What does that look like in Bangladesh? Your country has history many don't know about with Baraka and Grameen Bank, and really one of the epicenters of social innovation in the world.
Yeah, I guess that is part of our DNA. Whatever we do, we have this collectivist sort of a mindset rather than individualistic. So whenever we decide to do certain things, we ensure that the society, what sort of impact the society is going to have if we undertake such a venture. That has driven even the entrepreneurs, as you've seen, Munawar, to ensure that if the society benefits out of it, automatically there's going to be an economic benefit tagged to it. And the density by itself is also an advantage because we are having a large group of sort of customers in a very small space, so you really don't have to run around. So that also is an advantage in a way, but we are taking it, that particular sort of density to play around with and come up with products and services which are going to be socially beneficial to start off with, and automatically that will result in higher prosperity for the society and economic benefit for the entrepreneurs such as Munawar.
So give us an example that you think is particularly illustrative of how this dynamic might work in Bangladesh and perhaps other places in the world.
Well, even other places of the world, I would say that, let me give you one example. We started off, I'm sure most of you probably would be aware of the fact that we are the second largest garment producer in the world. So that is quite a bit, if you're really talking in terms of after China. And so we were looking at them and we were saying, hey, fine, you are fine out there, but what are you going to do in terms of making your factories green? And mind it.
And garment factories have
a lot of garment factories.
A lot of issues.
They only have issues.
Yeah.
So we were talking, and mind it, right now as we speak, amongst the top 10 green factories in the world, 7 are in Bangladesh.
In the garment industry.
Yes. So we said, what are you going to do? And they came up with their own sort of strategy. And it was, if we save water by bringing in some sort of technology, if we save electricity, what are we primarily going to do? We are actually giving it back to the society. So you can see the mindset totally different. The mindset is not in terms of reducing the costs or making more profit. The mindset is more in terms of giving it back to the society. And automatically that is going to bring me or make me a better organization.
How far can we push that? And this is a question for all three of you, because obviously this sounds great and I want to do this. But as a business, I also have to compete and I have to remain efficient. And the more that I allocate here, I can't allocate to remaining efficient and profitability, and eventually I could go out of business. How do you navigate? How do you balance between those two? Professor, maybe Munawar, you
The business part, Munawar will probably.
I think I tell this to people, if you ask me 30 or 40 years back, most of the people were talking shortcuts, right, in making money. I think that's how the time was, the horizons of that time, whatever you meant.
Yeah.
But I think people are exposed enough, intelligent enough, educated enough today, even in Bangladesh, that to very clearly understand that, yes, it takes a bit of teething trouble initially, but if you do good in terms of systems, environment, health, and everything, efficiency, it eventually pays off. You may end up doing 25, 40% initial investments, but in a matter of 5, 6, 7 years, it starts actually paying off. And the most important thing is that even your consumers in Bangladesh, because of the internet, the exposure to the whole world, are becoming extremely aware of what is it that they are using. So traditionally, we would take it for granted, what does a rural customer in Bangladesh would know about it? But that's no more true, because they are so well exposed today because of the Facebooks and social media and the whole world. So I think that sort of accountability also drives on enterprises to go about doing it for right. That would be my take.
So we're coming down to the end of our brief conversation, but as we all know, the conversation doesn't end here.
Yeah.
Hopefully continues. What is one thing you would say to people around the world as to why should you come to Bangladesh? Why are you coming to Bangladesh? What can we do to engage?
What I would say is, my students also come up and they tell me that let's say we are talking about technology of tomorrow, the fourth industrial revolution. And they ask me the question, why do we have to go and do it? And if I ask them, you tell me, and they'll come up and they'll answer in a very particular way. And this is the youth I'm talking about. Their mindset is so different. They come up and tell me, the way we analyze our country is the following. 100, 200 years from now, whatever the world is going to face, we already have it today here. So you can come up and see how to fight it out. Because it's not just a question of coming up with smart cities. It's a question of coming up with sustainable cities with, of course, technology, with innovations in technology. This is something that we are good at. And this is something I'm sure that the world can come and visit us, and we can work it out together, and we can take the world forward. That is what I guess our mantra is.
And so many things I saw when I was there, and I've been tracking a bit since, how much can be done. A friend of my sister's, George Aidi, is a Ghanaian economist, and he said, in Africa, we have done so much with so little for so long, we can now do anything with nothing. and what happens there, and it takes an entrepreneurial spirit, whether in government or business. Anir or Munawar, do you want to add to this last note about what can you expect to find in Bangladesh?
I'll supplement what the professor has said. I think we're now working on a 20-year strategy, the next 20 years, so 2041. So we did a Vision 2021. Now we're working on a Vision 2041, which is going to be the 70th anniversary of the country. And we think the 4 actors, the government, the business, the academia, and citizens themselves have to work together. A lot of these innovations will come out of individuals, communities, not institutions, not formal institutions as we know of them. So this sort of collaboration of these 4 actors is something that actually can be demonstrated in Bangladesh. And I think countries who are in similar situation could actually come and see how we are making that collaboration happen.
And mind that the Prime Minister has endorsed this particular project. We've already had discussions with the academia and the industry. So it has already started to move. And our target is, by doing that, what we are going to achieve is by 2041, and you can keep yourself in our radar, we'll be a developed nation.
By 2041.
By 2041.
Professor Anwar also talked about 4th Industrial Revolution, which brings unprecedented opportunities, but also great threats. We're already seeing a lot of job losses because of automation. So that's something we're particularly concerned about.
Extraordinary pressure in a country that is focused so much.
As we create new opportunities, we also have to be aware of the threats that we are also creating at the same time. So it's 2 sides of the same coin. We're talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about blockchain, we're talking about Internet of Things, and they're inundating the entire society with opportunities and threats. So creating the right balance between these 2. We had a session with our Prime Minister yesterday at the General Assembly on cyber war. And Singapore was there, Estonia was there, who are actually leaders in the cyber war. But we are facing the same threats as well. So as we look at opportunities, we're also looking at threats and making the right balance in terms of policy decisions, in terms of collaboration. So that's also something we can share with the rest of the world.
So only the paranoid survive. Munawar, very brief response, and then we'll conclude.
So I go back to my initial statement. It's the best marketplace, again, to create deliverable demand for the unserved masses. I think Bangladesh has the best lab. You have lab for everything. So here is this lab, and this whole human ethos and the technology. When you bring it together, we believe it will be a replicable model across.
So 20 years, we have a 20-year plan for our 70th anniversary. That's impressive, and they're working on it across sector. Now, of course, there are extraordinary challenges, issues. We talked about many of them. We didn't have time to go into them today. We get that, but talk about a laboratory. Remember I said yesterday there are millions of experiments going on all over the world, regardless of what field you're in? Exelon, our great sponsor, client, love what they're doing, thinking about distributed energy generation. What's going on at Munawar's company? But distributed energy generation at the level of the cell phone. And it's already happening all across Bangladesh. What can we learn from that? You're creating with this entrepreneurial thing kind of the McDonald's of Bangladesh. Now, I don't mean in terms of the food, but in terms of enabling the franchise, enabled families who were rising up after World War II to own and build a successful, prosperous business. It was a business in a box. And that's what you're providing. Anir, the public-private, it's tough, but it really is having some output and some tangible output. Empathy requires taking risks. Well, I feel that, and I hope that everyone else felt that. Diversity and density as an advantage, the density of the population. The world is as it is in some ways, but we make it what we make it. and to take that challenge as an advantage, to create healthy competition within these sectors as well. And I'll conclude with your comment about why do we have to do it? That's a great question for all of us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.